My name's Ed Piscor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
Jim, it was a while ago on a trip to a comic convention that you said, Ed, watch. When you turn 35, there is no more media. They're not selling to you anymore. You're not going to have any TV shows to latch onto. You're not going to have any movies to latch onto. You are aged out of that 18 to 35-year-old discretionary income male demographic. And it's true. Like when I hit 35, very little stuff on the tubes for me to latch onto that's new. One of the things that is built for me is Dark Side of the Ring, and we have Evan Husney. What's the title, man? Like I know for a fact that you were the stand-in for the Jimmy Hart character, but I believe you were executive producer on that as well. And the comic book connection is that Evan has been running and participating in, with a few other people, the Power Comics Instagram account that was Blogspot.
I think a blog. Yeah, it was definitely a blog before that.
And,
a
Tumblr, and we were following that thing for quite a long time. So the fact that, like, you know, I said in email, it's scary how close our tastes align with a lot of stuff. I mean, you're even working on the New York City Outlaws feature film. So like we need to get into all of that. Evan, thanks for coming by, dude.
Thanks for having me. And I've been a fan of you guys too for a very long time. So I think this is a long time in the making.
When we first connected, you were knee deep in production, and you were like, dude, just let me get back to the apartment so that I could be near the Power Comics. And
that's right.
And through your AV wizardry, you have a 2-camera setup, man. So we could even take a look at a couple essentials. So it's going to be a good episode, man. This
I'm excited.
Cartoonist and Kayfabe is going to be well represented.
Yeah, and even though I'm so fixated on the production, that this be a high production value show, I realized I left my air conditioner on. Do you think I should turn it off? We don't
hear one buzz of it, man.
Okay.
So no, you sound real good.
Good.
So I don't know whether.
So yeah,
we start with wrestling or comics. Dark Side of the Ring is probably what, the higher profile of the two. Can you give us a little background on how you got involved in that? What your background with wrestling is?
Sure. Yeah. So wrestling has always been a huge part of my life. I mean, you can tell from probably behind me here. But I grew up a huge wrestling fan. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
AWA territory.
AWA territory. Vern's backyard. And around 5 years old, my parents got me my first action figure, which was a big Boss Man toy, which was kind of the gateway drug into getting into WWF and getting into all that stuff. And it was cool, man. I mean, growing up, it's kind of a fun story about my first wrestling memory, which is my parents took me to a WWF house show, I think in like 91 or something. And I was a big G.I. Joe fan as a kid, had all the G.I. Joes, was super into G.I. Joe. And Sergeant Slaughter was going to be appearing at the WWF event. And that's who I wanted to see, because he was like my action figure come to life at that point. But the WWF had flipped him to being a Iraqi sympathizer character, turning against America. But I was too young to understand the difference. So here I am as a kid, shouting at the top of my lungs for Sergeant Slaughter and being a big fan of him. And when Hulk Hogan came out, I didn't know who he was. I was like, who's this bald weirdo who's assaulting my G.I. Joe? And when that happened and everybody was cheering, I thought I was like this alien, and like, what is going on? And I was actually crying. I actually cried because Sergeant Slaughter, the Iraqi sympathizer, was being beat up by this random man. And my parents thought I had some sort of, issues in my development. But it was good. From there, I was hooked. And, of course, I became a Hulkamaniac and everything. Wrestling's been a huge part of my life. And then, basically I met Jason Eisner, who's kind of my partner in everything that we do. I mean, we'll talk about New York City Outlaws and talk about comics, and we'll talk about everything else. But he and I became friends a little over 10 years ago, and we both had huge wrestling childhoods. And we had gotten to the film business, and then along the lines, we were just sharing these shoot interviews back and forth, these like YouTube shoot interviews with wrestlers, because they're amazing storytellers. And we actually really wanted to make a dramatic scripted series about wrestling. That was the dream. The dream was to do like a Sopranos style of the territories kind of TV show. I mean, and that's like the hardest thing you can possibly get to make. It's like impossible. And then we tried to pitch ideas around town for that, but nobody in LA or in the entertainment industry really gave a shit about wrestling at all. So we quickly learned that. And that was kind of the hard thing for us. So then while I was working at Vice producing documentaries, it was like, well, let's show the world that these stories are interesting and fascinating to people who don't care about wrestling, because there's these insane amounts of tragic human interest stories in wrestling that transcend what wrestling is. And so that's when we started to really develop this idea of making a show and making a doc series. And that's when we latched onto the Bruiser Brody story as the story that really captivated us and said, okay, let's kind of put together this true crime meets wrestling sort of vibe. And we combined our influences of Unsolved Mysteries and Errol Morris's Thin Blue Line, which we love, and kind of bring this like really cool, high production value gloss to the world of wrestling to really elevate these stories. And, I'm paraphrasing it, but after a lot of salesmanship and a lot of pitching, we got Vice to come on board and to do the pilot, which was the Bruiser Brody episode.
We fast forward, and Dark Side of the Ring is like the most popular show that Vice has ever done, correct?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, man. See, like we'll be the accomplishment intro for you, so you don't have to. You can stay humble.
It's shocking to me the resistance people exhibit to wrestling. Like, wrestling has a history that's basically as long as television. It's always been popular on television. And yet it seems like it's always a hard sell. Like, anytime a new organization wants TV or, a documentary series shows up, it's like, you got to prove it again. And it's weird because it has a 70-year track record at this point in popular media.
It's probably like, so few people watching stuff on TV, like, so advertising's the thing. And like, I bet you they associate the person that watches wrestling with, like, the Alex Jones fluoride water advertiser is going to be the one that's going to come, promote the show or something.
You hit the nail on the head. It's basically a one of two things. One is a lot of people are like, well, that's fake, isn't it? And so by virtue of that, it becomes not, worth a damn, because people don't like to be duped in that regard. And then advertising. Yes, wrestling does rate really well on TV, but there's a stigma that the audience is not worth anything, to advertisers, which is not true. That's actually completely changed, and completely different now with, us as kids now of growing up and are affluent and, want to spend lots of money on action figures.
Evan, what year were you born, dude?
I was born in 86.
Okay. Wow. I'm 82. Like, because like the trajectory, like the interests are just the overlap is too perfect.
Yeah,
Jason is 82, so you guys are like right on the money.
That's the other thing too. There's a couple Dark Side of the Ring contributors who are in the Kayfabe community, man. Because we were talking a couple of things on some one of our weekly shoots, and you mentioned like, oh, they should do the Belzer Hulk Hogan thing, and then somebody I think somebody who works in mastering or the music component. Is like, is like
our composer.
Stay tuned, guys. Stay tuned, guys. You're gonna get to see that Belzer piece. Has the show run its course, or are you working on a new season, or Light Side of the Ring is coming out? Something.
Light Side of the Ring. Well, yeah. So the between Vice and between us, we all really want to get back to work and making another season. We've kind of been, with everything that's been going on in the world, we've kind of put things off a little bit to the side, but there might be some announcements coming pretty soon here, and about us getting back to it. So stay tuned. Some cool things will be announced very soon.
Yeah, in a little bit we'll be those annoying fans to like lay out our pitches of future
we have
things.
Some season 3
ideas.
If
you got them, we'll take them. If you got them, we'll take them. Yeah, for sure.
Evan, you mentioned the territory days, and there's a lot I like about wrestling. We've talked about it extensively on the program. obviously there's a lot of storytelling that takes place within the wrestling ring, but there's also all the great history, of course, with the territories and decades, a century of wrestling history to draw from that I love.
Yeah.
Going a different direction, what do you make of like contemporary wrestling? Are you a fan of contemporary wrestling? Are there things that you like or follow, or are you purely into the history?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much into the good old days of wrestling. I it's so hard to keep up with wrestling today, just because there's so much of it, especially on every week. I mean, occasionally I'll dip back into like a big pay-per-view, or if there's a big match or someone catches my attention. There are wrestlers today that I like. I just don't. Wrestling today is kind of. I hate to sound like one of those guys from the old guard kind of talking about wrestling today, but I really do agree with a lot of the criticisms about wrestling today, just in terms of how it's teetering too much on the entertainment side. And I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like there's so much people could take it into a different direction. It feels stale to me. And I don't like it. It's just hard for me to watch when it's like the fourth wall has been broken so far, like it's just so like, now we're just talking about like the things people talk about when they're talking about wrestling or the show they just watched is like the decisions the writers made. And then you just know that like all the performers today, I mean, you just watch people catching people. It's all really it is. And it's like, to me, I just like that magic is gone. It's like watching a new Star Wars movie. It's like you can't watch a new Star Wars movie because the magic is just not there. There's just no magic in terms of how it's made, like the tactileness of it, and just like that whole other layer of it. So to me, it's like, it's just hard for me to get into because it's just not the same.
The simplicity of that old stuff that like really shouldn't be given short shrift. Like you could go to a show, it's very clear who the good guy is, very clear who the bad guy is. They sometimes fit into archetypes that are real fun, and and move forward. If you see a guy start dancing on top of American flag, you're probably not going to want to be rooting for that dude or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that shit.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. And no, totally. And I've been using this time and now more so to get back into like wrestling that I missed as a kid, like the territory stuff, or for example, like stuff in Japan. Like I've been really into that like kind of mid 90s Japan wrestling, which is just phenomenal stuff. And like FMW, if you guys haven't dug into FMW, you guys need to do it because it is amazing, like action figure playset wrestling. It's so good. Like they have a ring in the middle of like a body of water that's like has barbed wire ring ropes around the like barbed wire, and like the wrestlers have to take little boats out to the ring and stuff.
That's hard.
It's amazing.
As hell.
You guys would love it.
That sounds like a power comic.
It does.
It is. It's power comic wrestling. I forget I can actually say that here.
yeah, dude. It's the audience is very literate in the things that we're speaking. Can you tell us what is power comics?
Can you give us a very quick, what's the origin of reading comics for you? We got the background on wrestling. Give us the comics and then get us into power comics.
Sure. So comics for me, I honestly was never like a huge comic book fan as a kid. I mean, my brother was more of like the Marvel comic collector, super into like Wolverine and super into, growing up, and Spider-Man and things like that, which I always loved. And I love the art and everything. And also, of course, X-Men, all that stuff that I liked as a kid growing up in the early 90s. How could you not? I mean, that was all around us. And then for me, it's like I really got into comic books again into my 20s, really into the heavy metal magazine kind of aesthetic, like super into Mobius. And I was listening to listening to the prog rock albums and then looking at the heavy metal comics. So there used to be a comic book store here in New York City that I have to shout out. It was this place called oh my God, am I really going to blank on this? It was called The Time Machine. And it was this amazing walk-up wood paneling. You guys would love it. Wood paneling place. You could smoke in there, which was crazy. And this guy had all of these like heavy metal magazines and all of the Mobius stuff. And that's what I really got into. And I really got into that stuff. I got into Dr. Solar, the Gold Key stuff, because that stuff just looks amazing. And then really got into another heavy metal guy, Philip Drouillet. Like his stuff is just insane, And so I really got into that aesthetic. And then it was one day I was with my friend Zach Carlson, who deserves all the Power Comics shout out, because he's the guy that really turned me on to this stuff, whatever you want to call it. But he was the guy that first showed me New York City Outlaws. And Zach was kind of like, you got to see this comic book. And he kind of explained to me this story, which I think is more lore than truth, about, you know, Ken Landgraf, the artist, about how, like, you know, he was this guy and he worked in this kitchen, you know, and somewhere in New York, and then he was drawing these comics, and then like he would always be at this restaurant, and then he showed it to me, and he showed me like how if you want more issues, you got to write to him at this restaurant, care of this restaurant, and the whole thing was just super private press and like really just cool homegrown Warriors style story, and the artwork was unbelievable. And so I was like, oh my God. And then he turned me on to the magic of Mile High Comics, which I don't know if you guys are familiar. And so then he and I just spent like a day going through Mile High Comics, ordering all of these individual private press one-off comic books. And he turned me on to a couple others that he knew of. And Zach Carlson is amazing. He also wrote this book, which is all about anytime a punk appears in a movie. Can I just grab it really quick?
Yeah, do it.
Carlson wrote this book.
Right.
Which is amazing. Destroy All Movies. It's the complete guide to anytime a punk appears in a movie, it is in this book. So sometimes like it'll say like you have to have the widescreen edition of the movie to see the punk in the background. It's insane. Anyway, so he's a big fan of this stuff, and then he turned me on to New York City Outlaws. I bought them all.
You have issue 5?
I must.
Hard to find,
that's
man.
the rare one. I've only seen 2 of those in my entire life.
Well, we're going to get to my New York City Outlaws collection in a second, because there's an interesting story with that. But anyway, so he showed me those. I couldn't believe it. It was amazing, amazing, amazing. And then I just started to obsess over this idea of all of these kind of frustrated artwork, is what I call it. Like, you know, all the dreamers in the basement who, you know, saw the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics and were like, I can do this too. And then, you know, they really tried really hard to draw that guy with the muscle, or they're maybe tracing, you know, and then trying to draw some muscles and they can't quite do it. And there's just something like some outsidery folk art quality to those comic books that I just really captivated me. And I got, just like how I'd also collect like frustrated metal bands of the 80s, like all the basement metal bands that put out maybe 1 or 2 tracks, but somehow it bizarrely has a keyboard in it that shouldn't be there. And, you know, and I just like that. I just like the quality of it that seems different and, you know, and pure and innocent. And that really grabbed me. So what I started to do is I started to go to the Time Machine in New York City, and I started to go to all these other comic book stores. There's this crazy comic book warehouse in Brooklyn, South Brooklyn too. I just started to dig through all of the, you know, miscellaneous bins and looking for these.
Coke warehouse. They do a lot of eBay sales, so you can find their stuff. You know, people at home that aren't in Brooklyn can track down some of that great warehouse.
Oh yeah, what is that place called? Do you know what I'm talking about?
KOCH. I think it's Coke or
Koch Comics. Koch Comics. Thank you. Yeah, Koch Comics is insane. You have to go at some point in your life, because it's a place that should not exist, but it does. And it's just this amazing, huge warehouse. You know, definitely rats are running around in there for sure. But you can, your hands will be like covered in dust. Like I've come back, like it's insane. But you'll find all of these Power Comics and all these other weird things and magazines, and it's amazing. That's how I found a lot of these, was just digging through crates, because there's no other database for them. There's no other thing. So Zach and I started the Tumblr. So we started the Power Comics Tumblr and just started posting them as we would find them, basically.
$1, a quarter? What are you paying on John Tar?
Well, this is the best thing, is when so John Tar was obviously one that really spoke to us in a big way. That's kind of the Citizen Kane of Power Comics, as far as I'm concerned. But for John Tar, it was so funny, because when you go to Koch Comics and you go up to the Mr. Koch, the guy who's there, and you know, and he just looks like he's been, you know, in that comic bunker for 30 years and hasn't left and seen daylight, you know. But you basically walk up to him like, yeah, so I'm like looking for this comic called John Tar, and he'll just be like, "Oh yeah, John Tar, this way," and he knows exactly where in this huge facility where the John Tar section is, which nobody else would find. And so that's just amazing. But yeah, you're paying 50 cents to $1 for these comics. Nothing at that time was anything over $1 usually. And also Mile High Comics would have these insane discount sales. They have like these 75% off discount sales. So you could literally buy all these Power comics for like $30, and then you get a giant box of all these that would show up, and it was like Christmas. It was amazing. It was like my favorite thing to collect because it was so cheap, but yet so cool.
That private press term is interesting. Ed and I have been collecting these kind of books for a while too, and we think of them as like self-published or black and white explosion books. I haven't heard that term private press. That's great. And the frustrated artists and dreamers, that's a really good description of what
that was part of the
is.
Inspiration for me, of just one of the joys for me of collecting these comics is to also Google the name after reading it, and sometimes you discover some cool things. People go into video games or something.
Yeah.
Other times, the name doesn't register on one website anywhere in the universe, and that's and that makes it even more sexy. Like, who is this person?
Yeah, yeah. What's the backstory? And then the other thing too, one of the things that when we did the Tumblr, the Power Comics Tumblr, we kind of summed it up of what this is, and I still think it rings perfect for what this is. It's quote, where enthusiasm meets frustration.
That enthusiasm is a huge part of it. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And so we just got way into it. And one of the other hacks that we did is if you go to milehighcomics.com and you actually search by publisher. So if you found one, you could actually search the publisher's name, and that's where you found all the others. You're like, oh, because if they're releasing one of these, they're probably releasing a couple other titles, and that's how we found a lot of these.
Evan, do you have the complete bibliography of Silver Wolf comics? Is that what you're here to tell us?
Yes, of course. Yeah, because you would find Steck or whatever whatever
drawn by Lorenzo Lasagna.
Oh yeah, Lorenzo Lasagna, really?
Lasagna. Also from Black Bow.
Yeah, and you would just go and you click on Silver Wolf, and then you just buy all of them, and that would only cost you $4. And you're like, wow, I have the whole library for $4.
Yeah, you only overpaid by like $3.75.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, me and Jim were collecting these things for years. We were planning on doing this YouTube channel about 15 years ago, but we needed to scoop all the stuff up we needed beforehand.
You got to buy it all up. You got to buy. Hopefully, I have some things here that you guys have never seen.
Yes.
I'm hoping that there's some new things that I have.
It's one of the great things with these black and white comics is so many of them are regional.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, they don't escape those regions. So, you'll have boxes of them show up when somebody moves out of their apartment or something because they sold 4 to their friends and then they, printed 900 of them.
I know.
But anytime
how many more are out there?
That's what you do is look for those dusty bins in the back of the comic shop because a lot of them are they just never got wide distribution. So people always have new ones. You mentioned that you don't see them all listed anywhere. And it's true. It's one of the great things. Like blaxploitation films have some of that quality where it's like start digging and you'll just find more and more and more. And these comics seem to be never ending in terms of even good ones. Like you just come across a good one, like you said, Ed, and it's not on Google. It's not on Google. It doesn't seem to be like it doesn't exist except you're holding it in your hands going, this is cool. I need more of this artist.
So with a little bit of the enthusiasm and the frustration, another adjective that comes up in my mind for many of them, certainly if you meet some of these guys, is there's delusion is a part of it. And one of the things that will happen is they will print up 5,000 copies of a thing, and then it'll show up, and then it's like, oh, now what? Oh, what's distribution? Yeah. Like that other part of just getting the books out there, they just lack that piece.
Yeah, and I would also be kind of remiss if I didn't mention that another thing that why these really spoke to me too is because I'm also really into the film equivalents of Power Comics as well. Because you see a lot of that. You see a lot of directors who are big dreamers and go out there with all the enthusiasm and all the frustration to make something, and they do end up making something really creative and crazy. Is it good? I don't know, but it's at least fascinating and entertaining, and all the dreams are there, and so for me, like, I love that. I love the tangential, hopes and dreams of these individuals that are making them, because you can picture that as you're reading it too. And one of the qualities that I'm sure we'll talk about that's in most of the power comics, which I think is so funny and also endearing as hell, is all the intros by the authors, or all the outros always mention, they're always so self-deprecating, and they're always like, we really tried, or Steve's really got to work on his art, Steve really was going to try harder in the next episode. They always bury the artist, and then they always say, we really hope for issue 2 is going to be better, and then there's never an issue 2. So I just love that. I love that. I love this, the story beyond the story.
I'm glad you brought up the filmic component of it, because another common ground that we probably share is just like growing up in the era of the mom and pop video store, and these shops would have 300 tapes in the entire store. You could watch one a day. In a year, you could see the entire filmography, and there were a lot of made-for-video flicks out there. And they share the same energy. I've sort of always have said that.
You know what that is it's distribution. So, like whenever the comics exploded, it's because of the direct market. And it's like, oh, we have this very simple distribution system. And a lot of those videos, it's the same thing. Like once the stores happened and everybody had a VCR, it was like, we need product. We need tape for these shelves. And so it would be like things being dusted off. It'd be straight to video. Very little oversight. Like that's where you would see things like banned in England because of the stuff that was coming in.
Right. Like, would you guys say that like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is really kind of the main reason we have a lot of these?
Definitely.
Yeah,
without a doubt. And I don't know if you like in my Outlaw Comics, Power Comics, like sub collecting, I will grab the anthropomorphic animal comics, but they're not a priority to me.
We have a rule.
I would put those on the site, and those definitely
don't get bought.
Yeah.
Those get left behind. No animals are banned, and they're not Power Comics.
Not even Space Beaver, Derek Robertson.
I mean, the only one that I'll say because it's insane is the what is it, the metamorphic manatee or whatever. Do you have that one?
I don't think so.
I don't know it.
Oh, that one. That's on the website because I can't even remember these names anymore. But I don't have it on me. Actually, we have one other person in our group, our Power Comics collective, and that is my friend Gabe, and he's got it equally obsessed, and he actually was the one that's maintaining and posting on the Instagram still, and he has some that I don't even have, and he was the one that found Marco. Yeah, Marco the metamorphic manatee. That's one that I will allow, but other than those, most of the animal ones get vetoed.
Yeah, and that makes sense. But those do illustrate that in that black and white era, when vanity press became a thing, like clearly these people thought that they were gonna at least get some trickle down from the Turtles magic.
Yeah, they always joke about how many of those turtle ripoffs there are, and I'm halfway through like a 1986 zine, and I have all the previews from Amazing Heroes that year, and those are great issues for this, like digging through like the preview issues, but there were 13 turtle ripoffs for like the second half of 1986.
Wow. Yeah, so that's what opened the floodgates, and and then from there you just have all these guys, and I just love picturing these artists in their basement or wood paneled basement, mom's basement, and just trying to draw that pec or that set of abs and just not quite getting there.
Now you are a producer and you do have that 2-camera shoot, and I am imagining that there's like a little pile of Power Comics within arm's length, man. So can we maybe go through a couple?
Sure, why not? Yeah. And yeah, feel free to I'm sure you guys have some of these. Is this good? Am I on?
Yeah,
perfect.
It looks great.
Okay. So we have to start with the Citizen Kane of Power Comics. This is what really started it all for me. I still think this is my favorite. At the end of the day, and you guys have this, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, you guys must have. Yes, sir. And in here, it's just like, and John Tar is about a an elf that is or a half man, he gets reborn as an elf, but he's also a Chippendales dancer, which is amazing. And yeah, and he finds the dead elf in the trash can. This is incredible. One of the things that we actually did when we found this is me and my friends got together and we all had our copies of John Tar #1, and we decided to read through the entire book playing the different characters, which is something I want to do someday. Like, I really want to give these comics the time of day they deserve, and to read through them and to make little videos, going through all the panels and playing all the characters. I think that'd be really fun. But this is just incredible, right? I mean, you guys love this, right?
Absolutely, man. Down to the hand lettering.
Yeah, and I think there are 3 or 4 issues of John Tar, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. So I got some of those because if you're going to show one, you have to show them all. So you got John Tar, the second one, which is just amazing. I love the patina of this hard paper cover here. And yeah, I mean, he gets a little better, but getting a little better to us is not necessarily good.
John Tar I often say if this stuff gets to a certain level of competency, it becomes totally uninteresting.
Yeah. Usually Eternity Comics, they would fuck that up. Like it would be just too close to professional.
Just too average.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole thing that we say where when we're at Koch Comics and we're digging through these and we look at it and there's a promising cover, but when we look through it and we're like, nope, too good. When something's too good, it's just too good. So John Tar Returns, amazing cover. I love it. So good. Yep. He's a biker elf, Chippendales dancer. Oh, look at this back cover too.
There's a whole subgenre of elf comics.
Yes.
I know. I have that. You guys have the elf face? The saga of elf face?
No, never heard of that one.
Okay, maybe I'll have to dig that one out. Yeah, so the John Tar Returns, are amazing. Yeah, so these John Tar Returns is incredible. These faces are just so good, and just there's kind of this like quaaluded quality a lot of the faces have in Power Comics.
They share a lot of the same. I call them equine features, like kind of the horse face, like a long nose. Sometimes the eyeballs are a little too close, like pulling from Barry Windsor Smith's Conan stuff, but before he became Windsor Smith, the Barry Smith era.
So yeah, I mean, there's so many of the John Tar, the John Tar ilk, and so yeah, he's our favorite hero of the Power Comics world. So definitely recommend everyone check out Power Comics. Now, also want to talk about New York City Outlaws. Now, this version of New York City Outlaws of mine survived a house fire, so that's why I've kept this, and just to show. I'm sure you guys have gone through this a lot, but just what this looks like is just insane. But this is the thing that started it all for me. I mean, just looking at this and just being captivated by how amazing this, just like the red and the black, combination of this. And we also should talk about New York City Outlaws, the movie.
Oh, definitely.
Which is something we'll do after this. But this is really the gateway drug would really, I mean, this is too good, if we're really talking about Power Comics. But I think the self-press, the self-published, the DIY-ness of this is what kind of still crosses over into the Power Comics realm, but it is really good. I mean, technically, right? I mean, you guys would have to agree.
The thing that I love about that period of Landgraph and New York City Outlaws in particular is I always, like, when I was a little kid going to arcade, I sort of wanted to see a comic that looked like it was drawn by the people who drew, like, the Double Dragon arcade cabinet, because it was like not as good. It wasn't as good as Marvel Comics, but it was like still butch and macho and cool, but it was like a little off. And that's what New York City Outlaws is to me. It's like pinball back glass artwork in comic form, and you just don't get much of that.
That's true. That is very, 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 very true. Very good point. One thing I should say that I need to dig out, which I should have for this, but I forgot, is I actually have Ken Landgraf's color study of this page that he gave me.
And what would that be? Would it be, when you say color study, are we talking the mechanical thing to like make that red happen on the page, or just him with like a color pencil trying to figure out where the red will go?
I think that's what it is. Okay. I think it's like a Xerox of this, and then he just took like a red marker or something and was trying to figure out where the red would go. But it's really cool looking.
Yeah.
And I do have that somewhere that he gave me on this actual page. So yeah, so this just captivated the hell out of us. Not only just for Power Comics, but for trying to make it into a movie, which is something that we should definitely get into after this little show and tell. And extra special shout out to Ken Landgraf on these too. I'm sure y'all got these. But Night Slayer, just a cool, just amazing vigilante. He signed it for me here, actually, 2012 when I met him. But yeah, this is just amazing. This again is just kind of too good for Power Comics. But again, I mean, look at these pages too. It's
They're
unreal.
incredible. One of the tough parts of these, he did a lot of magazine-sized books. So it's hard enough to find these comics as comic books. Once you get into the other sizes, it becomes exponentially harder to find them in back issues. And these two examples, both magazine size.
Why is that? Do you know?
Just the different size. It's a lot of stores don't have a good magazine backstock.
Yeah,
right.
If it's bigger than a comic box, like they get shy about it.
And yeah, Vicon too, which is kind of so Ken told me that he was really big, or he was a fan of Thor, the heavy metal glam rock singer who came through New York a lot, and he they crossed paths in one way or another, and he decided to make this heavy metal comic book for him, which is really cool because all of the words, if you look, are actually lyrics and they're meant to be sung, which I think is really cool. And you don't really see that. Very ambitious and also just totally rad. And one thing also I should mention is Ken Landgraf also illustrated an incredible Manowar album cover for one of Manowar's records, which you can see. And yeah, and then again, just amazing. But again, almost too good for Power Comics. Okay. Let's get back to this. Y'all got Demon's Blood?
Yep.
You do? You're like, yeah. Demon's Blood was one that really spoke to me just because obviously this cover is traced. And then, it has this kind of, frustrated lurker in the background. But yeah, just amazing. Again, self-deprecating prologue, which, is such a key factor into all this. But this is that hastily drawn, like so crud, so crusty. I mean, look at this. This is beautiful, is it not?
Yeah, I love this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so good, so good. So Demon's Blood, just huge fan of that. Again, more tracing on the back. Like, what is this? But yeah, super great. What about Kendar, the Creon Warrior?
I don't have that one.
You don't have this
with that balloon font with the Creon Warrior part.
Yeah.
The little rub on.
Is amazing. I love this over the head here and camera angle. This one is just, this is just super weak sauce. But
can you tell what's making that gray tone? Is it the dots or is it duotone, like all parallel lines?
It just looks like cruddy marker or something.
Okay.
I don't know what would be making that, but yeah, it's pretty splashy and it's the eyes, are pretty great. This is kind of like a guy who opens a Pandora's box kind of storyline, and he becomes a Creon warrior, and it's Egyptian sub themes, but pretty amazing. Like this face here. Yeah. So yeah, Kendar, the Creon warrior. Love me some Lance Stanton. Y'all got this?
Yes. Sir.
Yeah, and this is just incredible. Just the shapes of people's heads and just how, like, the density. You can just feel how dense each person is, like they're filled with yogurt or something, which is just amazing. This one in particular definitely captivated us early on. I know that.
That's like a Son of Landgraf kind of style.
And hot tip for everybody watching this video: go accost Jason Hamlin because I just gave him my double of this. So.
Oh, and obviously got the Kirby influence too. So yeah, Lance Stanton must own. This is a low key one of my favorites because this is a very innocuous cover. It's like, okay, this doesn't look like it would be amazing, but or even by the back cover necessarily. But this is wild because of the color schemes in this. To me, is just like, and this is sadly a one-off because the story actually isn't that bad. But look at this, like nightmare, total nightmare, like killer, creepy, weird, like it's so good. And one of my favorite pages, the one that always kind of gets me with this one, weird animals, is coming up here. Yeah, this like just this crazy nightmare killer moment here, but also this here too, which is great, where he's just like waking up from this nightmare and he's like, was that a dream? And then someone, morning sleepyhead, what's wrong? Looks like you've seen a ghost. I have. It's so good.
Yeah, you're definitely gonna have to do some acting. You're gonna have to act some of this stuff out. I mean, not with us, but I'm saying, in future productions.
Not with us. By yourself. I think it would be great to have a series, get some really good people, and just read. Everyone gets a copy of these because they're 12 cents, and then just read from them, and then everyone gets to play a character. Okay, maybe my favorite Power Comic cover.
Oh, I don't know this one. You got this one, Jimmy?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This one I love because obviously it's just someone their sketchbook, but it's just the nightmarish quality of this, is so great. And this is an anthology of different horror stories. But yeah, just man, I mean,
look at her six-pack.
Her six-pack. Yeah. Oh man, yeah, this one's great. This is a part of a series. Oh, great face. Yeah, highly recommend the Macabre series. And yeah, this one gets freaky, definitely gets freaky, but it's really good. And this cover, oh wow, amazing. I love just black for the back too.
That's funny.
That's really great.
Anytime there's like a blank page, like sometimes you'll see like a blank inside back cover or front cover, and it just stands out as like so odd in a comic book to have a blank page, but you come across them in these indie comics.
It's cheaper. It's literally cheaper
right.
to not have that printed, and it could be by a factor of $100 depending on how many thousands you got.
Peter Risk, Monster Masher.
Yes, that's a great one.
Some days I wake up and feel like Peter Risk. I mean, does it get more frustrated than Peter Risk?
Look at the verbosity on page 1.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. And look at all the words, just like insane. Yeah, so good.
That's one of the delusion pieces, like that splash page piece, because it's like you're new to the game, you're fresh out, and now you're challenging all of us to read your fucking prose before we even get into the thing. See, that's where the delusion comes in.
Confidence. A lot of confidence goes into, I think, Peter Risk. And the one thing about Peter Risk this publisher in general has a ton of really good power comics. They have T-Bird Chronicles. If y'all are T-Bird Chronicles fans, they got tons of really good ones. But just the covers alone are so good. Oh yeah, wait, we got to get the gatefold here. Yeah, so good, great. We need to make Power Comics T-shirts, guys, at some point. Like, don't you want a Peter Risk shirt? I mean, I do.
I'd rep a Power Comics shirt.
Okay, cool. I mean, this is actually good. This actually might be too good.
I love Dreamweaver. This is one I stumbled across. I forget what I was looking for, and I found this randomly. There's actually 2 issues of this. The second issue is great because he gets shrunk down, which is such a good staple in comics whenever it's normal stuff, but it's just all big.
Yes. And this is a great story, too, about this dude just getting lost in this dream world. But, so great. Mustache confusion. So good. And this one, this actually might be too good, guys. But this one actually was one of the early ones that I found that really was like, oh, there's a whole world. Cool. Also, I love Power Comics Hell. Any depiction of Power Comics Hell is my favorite. But this really kind of opened the doors for me. Oh yeah. Did you enjoy this feature? Is this something you're supposed to send back to them? Okay. Here's what you liked, here's what you didn't like. I love feedback, giving them feedback. It's great.
They need to adjust.
Look at that. All right. Okay, we got a Power Comics wrestling crossover here.
Classic.
I'm sure you guys got this.
Whenever it flashed up on the Von Erich episode of Dark
Yeah.
Side of the Ring, I was like, these are our people, man.
Well, I mean, this I got many years before I actually, thought about before Dark Side of the Ring was a thing. Lots of tracing here, which is great. And when we did the episode, when we did the story, we knew that we had to include this as, obviously, because it's amazing that they had their own comic book, and it speaks to the fact that the Von Erich brothers, for those who don't know, it's kind of the Kennedys of wrestling. They went through just unrelenting amounts of tragedy, even though they were being portrayed as this infallible sort of larger than life superheroes, really. But then as tragedy struck them continually, it became this really insane story. But this we knew we had to work into the episode just purely because we got to shout out Power Comics, but also we asked Kevin Von Erich when we filmed with him, like, what's the story behind this? And yeah, it was just some endeavor, some fan or someone who came to the Sportatorium and knew how to draw comics came to them with the idea, and they just went with it. Amazing.
It was a giveaway in conjunction with the wrestling events, right? Or a sales, I guess maybe they sold it.
Oh yeah, no, this was something at the merch table.
Yeah.
Like you would when you were getting your $8 8x10s and autographs and things, like this was included there. And I just love how they worked in the claw, which is the Von Erich's finishing maneuver, into this cover. And like this should be a T-shirt that we sell.
It should be. I don't know why we haven't done that. It's not a well drawn hand. Hands are really hard to draw, and then like a flexing hand for the claw is almost impossible. So yeah.
Yeah. I just love it. Yeah. So, okay, one of the best Power Comics cover arts of all time. This is in the Power Comics Hall of Fame for sure. I don't know if you guys have Banyan of the High Fortress.
Never saw this one.
Which has the, but this is not that exciting, but it's kind of amazing because it has things like this in the inside.
That's sick.
But this is Bill W. Miller, so I believe this is some relation to John Tar. At least on the publishing side. But what it is it's not really a comic, of course. It's one of these, storybooks with that you're supposed to read all this garbage.
That's another element of those 80s like black and white comics is a lot of there's a subset of comics that are basically people illustrating their Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
Oh, that's exactly what this is. 100%. Exactly, which is amazing. That's incredible. Yeah, very much of that ilk, but it has some comic panel action in there. But yeah, this to me, again, another early one. Oh, that back cover, amazing. Want that T-shirt. But
Frazetta, eat your heart out.
I know exactly, but this cover alone is just amazing, and just the colors of it too are really great. Okay, you guys Thor Sverd fans?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this here is very important because this is the single most, I think, emblematic Power Comic frustrated illustration I've ever seen in my entire life, which is the back cover of this issue. And I'm going to give everybody like a trigger warning that this is going to kill you when you see it. So here, this to me is my favorite piece of Power Comic art ever. Where to begin with the burnt hair, the this amazing arm, again filled with yogurt, very dense, and just incredible, beautiful.
Wow, looks like Bob Newhart.
Yeah. What is going on here? But this literally is where it all. This is Genesis Power Comics of this is Gen 1. And then again on the inside, Thor Sverd's really cool because nothing really has like the stoic. Everyone's just quaaluted out in this comic book for sure.
Tom Selleck mustaches abound.
Yeah, and it's just all looks like woodblock cutouts, like just so bizarre. Not really that interesting, but this is the best. Okay, what about this one?
This is a good one. I love this comic. Like, unironically, I love this
Me
comic.
too. Yeah, Guardians of Justice in the O-Force. Really cool, actually. And the fact that it's color, too, I always love.
This character was an influence on... I just did a book, Octobriana, 1976, and it features a robot Stalin character. The villain from that splash page was an influence on how that character, Robot Stalin, came about.
Wow, yeah. Look how amazing this is. This one I just had to give a special shout out to because I was pretty ecstatic when I found this. I was like, this is a big deal.
It's always a rare treat to get a color power comic.
Love them. And that's why I'm just going to segue. Ooh, look at this. I'm just going to segue quickly into, obviously, like Total X-Men ripoff, but segue into some 90s power comics, which usually don't get as much love from us as they should, but some of them are just bizarre. Have you seen this one?
No.
The Strangers. This is when we do creep into the 90s, this to me was just pretty hilarious. Like these sharp bubbles. There's a lot of sharp. I don't know all the vernacular that you guys are all into.
What the way we describe is the motherfucker just used like the straight line in Photoshop.
Yeah. Are these like?
What is that? Little discs.
Yeah, little weird discs. But this one I like as far as the 90s go. It's pretty gross, pretty amazing. Weird colors. Like gross. So yeah, definitely the Strangers. I'd wear this shirt too. Okay. What about Mac Vigilante?
That looks awesome. I never seen that before. You see that, Jim?
I have that. Yeah.
You do? Do you have the promo copy though?
I don't know if I have the promo copy.
All right, but Mac is super amazing. This is great. Wow. Yes, this. So good. Yeah, Mac is important. We hadn't done Mac for the website yet. Oh, this face. Amazing.
Keeping both eyes open while looking in the microscope.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Mac is real deal.
The two eyes with the microscope just reminds me of this dude put the sun in front of clouds, and we never let that motherfucker forget that shit.
Gotta do just a couple shout outs to my OJ Power Comics real quick.
Yeah, that is a subset.
OJ's Big Bust Out. Y'all got this?
No, there are other ones though. There are those Hart D. Fisher OJ comics.
Which one's that?
Which one? What is that thing called, man?
You know what, man? I saw it recently too, and I can't think of it. It was something with OJ,
and that's part of his line of like Dahmer, Joey Buttafuoco.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, good. I'm glad this here.
Is that?
Yeah, that's he said, she said. This is its own series because this has like
Joey Buttafuoco.
Yeah, there's like 5 of these. It's all these different stories, but one of them is Tanya Harding has a story like this. It's pretty good.
You guys got to do a video series on this series. This series is amazing because the gimmick that it has is like, here's OJ's side of the story first that we're going to get, amazing. Of everything that like you get with the story and the lead up and his background and the more sympathetic side to OJ and the defense's arguments. And look at this. Wow. And then when you flip it over, this very offensive Nicole Simpson side, which has tears, unfortunately, and this really poorly drawn police car, which is amazing. So you have the Nicole Simpson story, which is her side of the events, and it gets into the abuse, and it details the abuse, and it details everything else. And this is just not necessarily, I mean, I guess it's a power comic, but I had to share it because and tracing, of course, which is just really kind of amazing. Okay, now we're gonna get into the deep cuts. Y'all got Hell for Leather?
No, sir.
Okay, good. This one is very angsty, very, very crudely drawn.
Looks photocopied.
Yeah. This cover, yeah, but this is some... Yeah, it is, actually. You're right. This is some real cruddy, crusty stuff here, which, to me is where it's at. The sweet spot. I mean, look, is that a throwing star? Or a flower? I don't know. But yeah, this is great. Great. I highly recommend you guys pick up Hell for Leather.
With the Xerox quality, there might be 50 copies of that.
Yeah, you say that like we're just gonna go to the corner store and grab it off the spinner rack.
Yeah, you guys got to grab it. But yeah, amazing. This is my This is my jam here. Wow.
Now,
Yeah,
Evan, another crazy thing that does happen with this channel, and it's never planned, but very often we'll go dig in, get some comics for a quarter, show off the box, and the creators materialize in the comments. Like they just watch this channel in general and pop up. So what I'm saying is, if the fella who made this comic, if he's got extra copies, man, we'll certainly take them.
Can I just point this out? That I want that masked mother. Yeah, this one is really good.
It's nice that he has taste and is abiding by the Comics Code Authority.
Yeah, he really is. This one is a big deal. Let's look at the gatefold. Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, hell for leather, everybody. Okay, this is one of the weirder things that I found, but talk about a Power Comics t-shirt. Anyone?
15 pence. So it's British.
This is British, and this is in the 70s. So I love when Power Comics goes 70s. That's kind of the sweet spot for me because everything's just like even more antiquated. But I mean, look at Homeboy here.
Do you know? Do you know Jack Katz's First Kingdom?
No.
I kind of want you to just see an issue and see if it ranks as Power Comic.
Okay.
It might be too good.
Guys, this needs to be on a white crew neck for me. Okay. I need to own this. Maybe without the bubble, but just this is so amazing to me.
Wow.
Yeah, I love the dark sorcery title letter there.
Sorcery. Yeah, and there's just more things to probably.
You know what? That's a fanzine, dude. There might be some really great artists who develop from that scene.
Oh no, totally. No, exactly. And this is but they all kind of have the similar quality. But no, you're right. This is an omnibus of sorts, it appears. But these guys are all on the same wavelength. They're on the same drugs. For sure. Yeah, amazing. I mean, look at that.
Yeah, those last several pages were really, really sharp. Some good stuff in there.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely look out for Mystique. Got to go pick up a copy of that.
There's this quality in a lot of these comics where it's either somebody's first comic, in which case they make a lot of you'll see a lot of similarity in terms of no backgrounds, certain shortcomings. Ed, you talk about the face, the face is being drawn wrong, but all drawn wrong the same way. The other piece that they have is it'll be an outsider person who clearly this person has some artistic talent, and now they've been drawn in to make their comic with their friend or somebody that's a big comics fan. So you get this stuff that's interesting looking, but again is outside of the norm or the expectations of comics.
A lot of front view, a lot of side view.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, this is going to get some airtime only because it again has one of the best back covers of all time that I've ever seen. So yeah, this obviously is amazing, but
I bet Glenn Brady was the original.
You kind of can't beat this. This is how I wake up usually. But amazing, hilarious. This is just a collection, another omnibus collection zine of style of other various gross things. Not really that good. I mean, wow. Wow, that's kind of cool actually. Traced, sure, but yeah. So this only deserves the airtime just for this back cover, which kills me. And then how could I not just at least bring on one issue of Battlemania?
There it is, man. Dave Lapham artwork.
That might be the first Dave Lapham artwork.
Really? This is the first one. And just I love this. I loved this as a kid, just to get into the wrestler comic crossover.
And Valiant. I mean, this is their earliest efforts.
It would be this, and then it would be Captain N the Game Master and Game Boy and Super Mario.
Yeah.
All licensed shit. Oh, there he is, man. The human... No. The
Human Tornado.
No, that's Dolomite. Oh.
Texas Tornado.
Yeah. But there he is, another Von Erich. Oh, I love the way they depict all these characters. I mean, it really elevates what WWF was doing at the time, making these larger-than-life cartoon characters.
Heck yeah, I like that. The Legion, the Road Warriors, wear their shoulder pads while on their motorcycles going cross country and shit.
Yes.
I think Ditko draws some of these.
Does he really? Oh, I got to get this Ultimate Warrior poster out of here, and the Undertaker one. Suburban Commando.
That was the era, man.
This was the era. So yeah, this. Oh yeah, there you go. Ultimate Warrior with his Game Boy.
With that
So that's
coiffed hair.
it, boys. The coiffed hair. Oh, and I just bought this for my niece. So yeah, there you go, guys. That is the. Hopefully, that was a good roundup of some of the Power comics.
Fantastic, man. How many comics you have in the collection, dude?
Oh my God, I don't know. I have probably about a long box and a half of just Power comics, and I will admit there are tons that I buy. There's tons that you have to blind buy and you have to get and have them come in, and I usually throw away a lot of them. If they suck, they're going in the garbage.
And I love that like if they suck, it might mean they're too good.
Right.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, this one's too good. Garbage. Yeah. So, yeah, it takes a lot for this, but yeah, those are kind of the big ones. Those are kind of the main. Some of the collections of some of our favorite Power comics and some of the weirder ones like that Mystique and stuff like that.
Let's bounce around a little because I'm curious, like Dark Side of the Ring stuff. Is there
Sure.
Is there like sort of episode premises that had to hit the cutting room floor that like you guys just will not explore, either too dark or not dark enough?
No. Nothing that's been too dark. I mean, we've gone pretty dark with the show. I hate to imagine what would be darker than some of the things that we've covered, but there have been, some episodes that, haven't come together for just out of lack of access, like getting the right people that you want to speak on behalf of those stories. Cause we always try to get the firsthand sort of, account of things. And sometimes if they didn't work out for season 1, we made them work for season 2. And now some of the ones we didn't get the chance to work for season 2, we're hopefully going into a season 3 that we'll be able to do. We haven't ever really fully abandoned an episode, but maybe it just hasn't been the right time.
Jimmy, what are some of your ideas for future episodes, man?
Yeah, hit me.
I have kind of a two-parter about the end of the AWA, and it involves Stan Hansen taking the AWA belt, but it also involves the end of Vern Gagne's life.
Oh, I have that written down too, man.
I heard a story about this. I guess.
Yeah, I know this.
You tell us then. Tell us what happened.
Okay.
Yeah, you come from the territory.
I come from the territory. Yeah, so it's very apropos that we discuss this because remember when I was talking about that we wanted to make a scripted series about wrestling, a Sopranos 7-season territory thing. And if it was to be like kind of modeled after the AWA or even World Class, we knew that we wanted like the very end of the 7th season, to be this story, like this would be the end of the road for our characters. And so what happened is Vern Gagne, who is the promoter of the AWA, or he was the big promoter of wrestling in the Midwest territories. And so he, at the end of his life, tragically, kind of was losing it. Imagine dementia, and he was in a nursing home, and ostensibly he got into an argument with another elderly gentleman there at the retirement facility and wound up straight up body slamming this dude. Basically putting a move on this guy, kind of having a wrestle flashback, if you will. And he actually killed this other person in this moment. And it's just, to me, such a tragic, but darkly poetic kind of moment there, and that really captivated us, and something that we wanted to have be like a crucial moment in our show if we were ever to make it.
When you read the article about that, there are several. It was a person with the last name Hennig that got slammed. So I wonder, could it be?
Wow.
But with the AWA thing, that's great too, because starting the fall of AWA, it's like Hulk is going to WWF, and there's that rumor of like the hit on that Vern was like offering money to like the Iron Sheik and people to like break Hulk Hogan's arm and leg and shit like that. So that would be a fun conspiracy to get into.
There's a lot there.
Totally. Absolutely. With AWA is fascinating territory for sure. Actually, one of my favorite really quick, if you want an AWA story, one of my favorite stories we got on the road about AWA was when we were doing the Road Warriors episode. And we interviewed this guy named Eddie Sharkey, who trained the Road Warriors and was a huge part of the Vern Gagne era. He was a wrestler in the 50s and the 60s. And he has an amazing story where he actually he was married to a female wrestler in the 60s. She was a native person, and she was, I think, Princess Little Cloud or something was her name. I can't remember exactly what her name was. But anyway, he was married to her, and Vern basically put the moves on her and said, if you want to wrestle in my territory, you're basically going to have to go to bed with me. And when Eddie Sharkey found out about this, he was rightfully hot. And so he went to the AWA offices with a loaded gun with the intent of actually shooting and killing Vern Gagne. But what he did is when he went to the offices, Vern wasn't there. Instead, he unloaded his entire pistol in his office, shooting everything. So this is, back in those Wild West era of the territories. This guy just goes up and shoots this guy's office up. And it was in the paper and never got arrested for it. So sign of the times. Things were a little different back then.
Yeah, those guys ran that area anyhow, man. Probably brought a lot of tax money in to pay those cops that would have been coming to arrest them. When you say Princess Little Cloud, that goes to like one of my episode possibilities where I think there must be a lot of darkness. To start the the wrestling bear, but that could be folded into an episode with something about Little Beaver, Sky Lolo, Little Honda.
Oh, yeah.
Like that era, I believe we call them little people. I bet that there's some carny darkness to that stuff. Did any of that come across your radar?
Yeah, I mean, it has over the course of the show.
Dink,
I mean, to go
Dink, perhaps.
Yeah, Dink. You got to talk about Dink. Yeah, definitely. Little people wrestlers have come up over the seasons and different stories tangentially. It's a good idea. I mean, to do kind of a story focusing on that because their experience must be super fascinating. I mean, we interviewed Tiny the Terrible for the New Jack episode from the last season. In the Fabulous Moolah episode, which is part of season 1. I'm now forgetting her name, and she was one of the little people wrestlers, but she was Moolah's, right hand and saw everything. And we almost were able to interview her. She was in her 70s, and we were almost able to interview her, and that would have been equally fascinating. But yeah, definitely a good suggestion to explore that territory.
That would go back into like the Carney days. Like you could do the whole history of like wrestling transition from Carneys to territories to present. And in that, like, attractions and draws and all the
what was that one
really
wrestling
dark history there?
That one wrestling called where like there would be the plants and stuff. Where if they would bring the guy up, the wrestler would make sure to wrestle him next to this curtain where a guy could blackjack the dude in the head and knock him out.
It's really kind of where wrestling started. Is the idea of a wrestler challenging locals to a match, and then they would have the one plant in there who would come up into the ring and he would wrestle, but it would be a fixed match. And so then people, their locals would believe that someone from their town, like some guy who was posing as like a sign painter, could go up and beat this person. And then that's what drew people in to cheer for that person and boo the actual wrestler.
Have you come across stories of the original Dutch Mantel from like the early 20th century would supposedly ride into these towns in Texas on a horse and would do pretty much the entire wrestling promotion carnival show kind of thing where he would drum up interest, but it would be with gambling with the locals, at the bar for arm wrestling and racing and kind of build to the whole town there and culminate in a wrestling match and then drive off with his saddlebags of money that he won from all the townspeople. But it's the whole promotion microcosm, before that.
That's fascinating. Wow, cool.
Andre the Giant's last ring appearances, I think, could be amazing because I believe he was still active in Japan after WWE had stopped showing him, but he still wanted to be part of it. And I guess Japan, there's like 2 big wrestling companies. He had worked for one most of his career, and then they trade him because the other company had more of they had some comedy sketch type things that he could still be a part of. So their respect for Andre was, we'll find a way to, still use you here in Japan, even if it means going to the rival company. but he was doing like comedy sketches. Like, he may have been going with arm braces and stuff at that point. It would fit the dark side of the ring stuff, but it'd be a chance to see Andre. Maybe his last ring appearances were probably in Japan under these conditions.
Yeah, and also we did kind of shed a little light on it too, because one of his last appearances as well was when he showed up to the UWF in the Herb Abrams episode. Was also one of the things. But yeah, I mean, Andre.
Episode.
Oh, thanks. I have if you can see up there at the top, that's one of the original turnbuckles to the ring.
As soon as the camera kicked on, that was where my eye went immediately.
Amazing.
I was thinking, is the steroid trials, like, is that shit too played out? Or just drugs in general? Like, you on the podcast, you always hear, like, I would take about 5 somas, drink that down with a 6-pack of beer, and I was good for the weekend. And, like,
Jesus Christ.
The culture of all that shit is important, because, like, these poor bastards are treated like circus animals and have to work, 320 days a year. And did you ever see the Conan O'Brien documentary, like when he was kind of in between things? And so he's doing his college tours, and the camera's with him, like, sort of at the end, and he's like, you just can't go to sleep after this. Right. So these people are playing in packed houses, and then you got to be up in the morning to travel. Yeah. But how do you come down from the adrenaline rush of what you just did? And the roller coaster of that is scary, like, because it's probably necessary to a certain extent, where it's just like, how do you got to get sleep somewhere.
Let me bring that to a topic then. Roddy Piper. I just heard a recent show, and it was a guy that was his assistant for a year, and he was talking about Piper's consumption of all kinds of substances, and that he had learned that on the road. Like, that was how you got to sleep or got up or made the plane or whatever. And that if you were to just stop that, you'd probably die. Yeah. There was so much stuff involved. But I love Piper's one of my favorites. He'd be a great episode subject, because, like, he it seemed like he kayfabed himself. Like he wrote, his first book. It's just all these outlandish stories. And then when he died, he was writing that second book that I think his family finished. And the idea was to unravel what was real and what wasn't. He had that feud with Stone Cold at the end over podcast that, like, I'm not sure it wasn't all made up by Piper.
Right.
Like, there's a whole bunch of Piper's life that's that way. Like, he told the story about his assistant tried to kill him with a car accident, and that assistant's, like, hanging out with him afterward. He's like, that just isn't what happened. So Piper would be interesting to look at and be like, what was kayfabe and what wasn't? Because he was always building that character and protected it fiercely.
Oh, totally. And just such an amazing someone I just wish that we could have had on the show too. Just one of the best personalities in wrestling. Such a great interview, great guy. And I believe the WWE is doing a documentary about Roddy as part of their deal with, I think, is it ESPN or something, I think. So it might be a little tricky at this point, but there is also one of the things that really fascinated us about Roddy is before he passed away, he was on one of these like celebrity ghost shows. I don't know if you ever saw that.
No.
But he was on there and talking about this story about how he and his family were haunted by the ghost of Adrian Adonis after he had passed away.
Wow.
Because Adrian Adonis had always told him to take care of your home, make sure to take care of your family, take care of your home. And then there was a moment when Roddy was on the road and he was coming home and his son ran out screaming out of the house because the carpet started on fire. And then Roddy ran in there and he saw Adrian's ghost and was telling him, you got to take care of your family, better care of your home and things like that. And he tells it as real as it can be. It's like, this is a real thing that happened to him. And then, of course, also in the episode, he talks about how there's this weird energy in this one room in his basement. And he talks about like almost forecasting his own death. And that's actually in that room is where he actually did pass away, which is wild. And so we always kind of toyed around with the idea is like, that show is so cheesily made because it's one of those ghost shows. What if we just buy the raw footage and just make our own, because that interview he gave was so phenomenal in that piece, but it's just all gunked up with like reality show garbage. It's interesting
when you bring up Roddy, and I'll just mention a name and we won't go into detail because nothing was ever proven or any of that. But like Roddy told Pat Patterson stories that would be very dark side of the ring if any of that stuff was ever proven. And you know, there were Phil Donahue episodes where some of those guys would come out and talk about that thing. But
you kind of just also touching on the steroid trials too, is like, you know, those kind of 90s scandals that the WWF was going through, and both interesting, fascinating stories. Again, they both kind of depend on the access that you would get, you know, to tell a story like that. I think the steroid trials is really fascinating, and there's a lot that a lot of people don't know about that story, going into it and out of it, and just the perspective of like, these guys who were taking steroids when they were legal, and then like what you were saying earlier, it's like what happens to your body when then now you can't take them, and kind of the science behind that and what's happening, and you know, and the toll that takes on you as well, psychologically and physically, you know, is definitely something you know, interesting there.
It was a pop culture trope at a certain point too, like Lyle Elzado and this you know, football star that like just dudes are dropping while they were taking that stuff, and these poor wrestlers, you know, don't get to see 50 years of age, a lot of guys, because of that stuff.
Right.
Right. Before we get out of here, we should hear about this New York City Outlaws film stuff. Do you have anything else?
I'm gonna just rifle off a couple dream ones real fast.
Yeah.
So
okay, go for it.
Brian Pillman, Loose Cannon, love all of it. Shot a gun on TV with Stone Cold Steve Austin. I think there'd be interest.
You will. Once we get rolling, I can say that's definitely one we want to do for sure.
Terry Funk in the Japanese death match, because like I used to see that stuff on the magazine covers, you know, like he did it to be on covers, and it sort of invented or popularized this whole style of wrestling that we still have today. I think, you know, Funk, I mean, anything with Terry Funk.
I was telling you guys to go check out FMW, and a lot of some of those death matches were in FMW. So
is that like Mr. Pogo and shit like that, where they have
Mr. Pogo and shit, and
Scorpions,
drills. And Hayabusa, but it has this quality of it, which is like, you know, there's like the garbage hardcore wrestling, which you see more nowadays, and the ECW kind of thing, which is really grungy hardcore. FMW found a way to do it with some gloss and some class, because they were like really drawing crowds of like 20,000, 30,000 people in stadiums for these shows. And what's amazing, if you go back and see, is it's really cinematic. There's this one match where it's Onita versus Funk in one of those barbed wire exploding ring matches, which if you go back and watch, there's like a timer that ticks down and then the whole fucking ring explodes, which is amazing. But what's so cool about it is after all of those high profile FMW matches, there's like this epilogue of despair where like this like kind of amazing, like, you know, 80s Japanese guitar solo starts playing. And then like there's like all of this smoke and fog, and it's all shot really amazing. And then these guys are kind of embracing each other after the battle they've been through. And there's like, it's in front of 20, 30,000 people. And it's incredible. Definitely check out FMW.
The last two that I had are Abdullah the Butcher, which is similar to the Terry Funk, where it was like the magazine covers, you know, like I knew him only from magazine covers, and he was the scariest looking dude ever. And then like, of course, the real life, you know, with hepatitis and stuff, like it could probably fit into the dark side of the ring.
True.
And then Memphis Wars. It'd be cool to see like something with territory wars, and that's the one I think of, because then you could bring in like Lanny Poffo, and you know, you have
the ICW,
Jerry Lawler,
the ICW against Memphis kind of invasions and people being pulling guns on each other.
You could probably get Cornette to talk about territory wars.
ICW
and stuff
was
like
a
that.
mud show. It was that mud show outlaw bullshit.
Actually, to bring up Jim real quick. Jim would be someone who would be interesting for Cartoonist Kayfabe, because he's a huge comic book collector.
Dude, at Castle Cornet, like when he's showing stuff off, I see long boxes, and I see it's like it says Dell and Harvey. So I think he's like down with like Hot Stuff, the little devil and shit like that. Like
he's got some real deal stuff, and he's, you know, because he was, you know, like as a kid, he has everything that he had when he was a kid still, you know, and so he bought a lot of those comic books. He always used to chastise his mother because he had an opportunity to buy like Action Comics #1, I don't know, for $2,000 or something or whatever, you know, and then he's always like, "Mom, we could have had the goddamn Action #1, goddamn it." Reminded her like every day. But he has all this amazing, you know, he's a graded comics guy, and he's got all those long boxes, and you know, yeah, he's a huge comic book collector, so he'd bridge that gap too between wrestling and comics. I tried to explain to him Power Comics once, and I think it just went, like
Yeah, that's Outlaw Mud Show Comics for him, I think.
You could totally use his nomenclature to sell it. Like it is Mud Show Comics.
It is total Outlaw Mud Show Comics.
Let's hit on some New York City Outlaws.
Yeah, man. So
Sure.
you were involved in the process from the very beginning. I guess that means you talked with Ken Landgraf and some paperwork was signed to try to sell this thing.
Yeah. So, man, it's been a journey. It's been it's been a journey with a lot of ups and a lot of downs. Unfortunately. So remember, I was talking about Zach. Zach who put up this amazing book. But Zach Carlson, was the guy that turned me on to Power Comics in the first place and New York City Outlaws. And so he and I started just getting really into it, buying all of them, and started just also, we're huge fans of 80s vigilante movies, a lot of direct to VHS films. He and I released a movie called Miami Connection, a little while ago, and we're just really into that kind of vibe. And so we always kind of toyed around with the idea of making New York City Outlaws into a movie. And then Jason Eisner, who does Dark Side of the Ring with me, he also got really obsessed with just, New York City Outlaws and Ken Landgraf's work. And then we really started to kind of sketch it out. Like, what would this be like? And the script for New York City Outlaws, so the three of us got together, also, I should say 4 of us, Zach Carlson's writing partner, Brian Connolly, who also wrote the Punk book with Zach. They basically started writing the script before we reached out to Ken or anything. And we started to kind of toy around with this idea where it was like, okay, it is going to, kind of have the idea of vigilantes coming together, people sick and tired of the way things are in New York, kind of that familiar trope that you see in those films. But we combined it with the idea of there being a police strike, which is interesting because as we've tried to get this movie made over and over and over and over and over again, the real world has gotten more insane than the fictitious world of New York City Outlaws. But there's this 80s film that we love called Siege, which is this Canadian, it's like the Canadian equivalent of Assault on Precinct 13. It's really, really amazing movie. And in that movie, there's a police strike. And that's kind of sets the stage for all of the action and the stakes of what's going to happen in the film. So we kind of wanted to have that's like the excuse that lawlessness is broken out in New York City. And we wanted to kind of focus in on one neighborhood of New York City because, this is going to be a lower budget movie. And so we picked this happening in kind of a neighborhood in Queens. And much like the comic book, you'd have these characters coming from different neighborhoods kind of coming together to sort of protect New York. And so the story really evolved over the years. We started writing it back in 2011. So a while back, and then that kind of evolved into just kind of updating it in terms of, trying to make the movie, more heightened when the real world becomes more insane, so we had to always kind of rewrite it as the years went by. But we had, then we reached out to Ken Landgraf and Bob Hazard, who was the guy that actually wrote it. And I'm forgetting the name of the other gentleman who also had a stake in the original comic books as well. And so we actually started, we had a script and we talked to Ken, and I met with Ken a couple times because he lives just, here in New York. And he was a real interesting, wild guy. And he would bring me different, comic books that he had done or just different illustrations, and we'd talk. And I got to know his backstory and that, he was in Vietnam and he came back and, he saw a lot of shit over there. And, but he really, channeled that into, his comic book arts, which he always loved. He'd worked for Marvel for a minute, I think, too. And just had this kind of unsung career and just told me about the challenges that he faced, but the kind of DIY spirit that he injected into his work. And that was kind of what we wanted to inject into the movie, is really have that kind of DIY action film quality. There's another film that really influenced us too, which is called Deadbeat at Dawn, which is this homegrown action film, very power comic action film, which is this guy, he plays all the parts, he directed it, he wrote it, he's a fight choreographer and everything. This guy named Jim Van Beber, and it takes place in Dayton, Ohio, and it's just this amazing 60 millimeter action film, total DIY. And we wanted to really borrow that aesthetic for what New York City Outlaws would be. And so as we sold, Bob and Ken on the idea, they signed a deal with us, and we were off to the races to try and raise the money. And long story short, we had two separate instances where we had two different companies signed to do this, or close to signing a contract to do this film, and something happened where it just kind of evaporated and went, and it didn't wind up happening. There was one instance where the second time we tried to get the movie made, the company was all on board. We were 2 days from opening the production office. We had all the locations scouted. We were going to shoot it in Toronto, and we were interviewing production heads, and everything was ready to go. And then they actually pulled the plug on the last minute because we didn't want to move the production to South Africa. And I'm thinking, how the hell can you make New York City Outlaws in South Africa? So it was crazy. So it's been a crazy, unfortunate kind of 9-year journey with this movie. But the interesting thing is that we've kind of stumbled across a different way to make it. Because the issue has always been the budget being too expensive, people think, for what we're able to do. It's this kind of weird game that you play in the film industry with the cast, people you want to cast, and how much money you have, and how much the budget is to really trigger all of this money for financiers. But what we found is through doing Dark Side of the Ring, we found that the way we approach the reenactments in Dark Side of the Ring, which is kind of this intentional, dreamlike kind of quality, nightmare quality that we bring to it, is we kind of felt like, what if we took the aesthetic of Dark Side of the Ring and kind of, amped it up, changed a few things, but really applied it to New York City Outlaws and kind of did it in that way. And then it kind of made so much more sense rather than trying to make this movie like in a normal way, like, not overtly stylized. And so then that really made a lot of sense to us. And hearkening back to issue number 2, which we looked at earlier, and how cool the black and the red looks. Like, what if you just make the goddamn movie look like that, and really push it and go for heavy style and shoot it all in a studio and make it more tactile, make it more like cardboard cutouts for the cityscapes in the background, and maybe do some more like, miniatures and models, and just make it more handmade. But I think that's really the spirit of what New York City Outlaws is to begin with. So at first we were trying to make it just more like you would a regular movie. But now to us, the answer took us 9 years to realize it, I think, is that we need to make this more with the spirit of what the movie really is. And so that's what we're trying to do now. And we've talked to a couple of exciting partners, people who actually were interested in making this movie from the very beginning. And now they're going to be now kind of reevaluating it with this new kind of artistic approach that we want to do. It may be something that you may see. So
I wish you a lot of luck with that, because I love that source material, and I love that setting of that New York of, late 70s, early 80s, 42nd Street. That's what I grew up with in comics and movies. All those straight to video movies, to take this full circle. So many of those are like Maniac Cop or something. Where it's almost stolen on these streets and alleys and warehouse districts. Like I can imagine that. Ways to do that, like you're describing, but I love that setting, so I sure hope this goes.
Yeah, and like Maniac Cop 2 is a huge inspiration too for us in that regard. And I think one of the things that we'll do, just with the story, is that like we've taken it in an interesting direction. Like a lot of the characters that from the comic are there, and in the script, your Thunderclap Jones, your et cetera, et cetera. But the thing that's really cool that I think that we've kind of stumbled across too in the process of writing this film for so long, especially as the real world has gotten more insane, it's kind of showed us that, the typical revenge film or the Warriors style film is kind of like, does it work in a 2020 environment? And what we found is that, like, it's funny because actually the people who are considered heroes in those movies back in the 70s and 80s, like now could be kind of looked at as villains. And so what we've kind of done is we've kind of taken that genre and turned it a little on its head. And who you thought were kind of the heroes of a world like that are more now the villains, and our characters, the New York City Outlaws, are the ones who are really rebelling against those people, the people that think they're doing good by the streets, but they're really doing just more harm than anything.
Evan, what do you got going on right now? Like what's in the works? What do you have anything to promote Power Comics is the Instagram. We're going to have that link in the description below. But how can people contact you, get a hold of the show, anything you want to promote?
Sure. Yeah. As far as Dark Side of the Ring goes, season 1 has just made it to Hulu, so that's a big deal for the show in terms of getting more eyeballs on it. And season 2 will be showing up on Hulu soon. But the coolest thing that's happening is that our soundtrack is coming to vinyl, which is coming out. It should be shipping next week, actually. And you can pre-order that on or order it now on waxworksrecords.com. It's a beautiful double vinyl package, amazing cover art. They did an incredible job. And Andrew Gordon McPherson, one of the composers of all of the music of all of Dark Side of the Ring, which is such a huge component of the show, he is the guy that's your biggest fans. He is the guy that turned me on to you guys and to what you do on Cartoonist Kayfabe. So shout out to Andrew and the record that's coming out. It's going to be amazing. And then, we're just, kind of waiting for the go sign in order to keep making more Dark Side of the Ring. So you'll probably be hearing some news and some updates on that very soon. At Power Comics or at Power_Comics is the Instagram handle. Life has gotten a little bit busy for us. And so it's been hard to update because there's a backlog of these, some of which we showed today, but others that I know that Gabe has, on file that we need to start posting more. I know it's one of the things where Power Comics goes in and out of existence, and people, it kind of disappears and goes silent for a few years and then comes back. We need to get into a regular habit of posting, and hopefully Gabe or Zach can pick up that torch soon. And you can follow me at Evan Husney on Instagram or Twitter. And the show is at Dark Side of Ring on Instagram and at Dark Side of the Ring on Twitter. And like I said, some awesome announcements are coming for the road ahead for the show. So stay tuned for that.
More power to you and all the best, because like I said at the top of the show, there's very little that excites me by way of like serialized television or anything like that. This is Dark Side of the Ring at the top of my list.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate that, guys.
Thanks for coming by, Evan.
Yeah. Thanks, Evan.
Thanks for having me.